Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. I'm excited today. We are going to be talking to author Alan R. Wells, and he is going to be telling us about his book for Pride Month. He also has two other books that are coming out soon that we're going to talk about. But I also wanted to give you all a heads up that we are going to be taking a little break from IG Lives. I'm going to be taking a little vacation, so we're going to have a few weeks off from the lives, but watch for those announcements because we will be back in July, after 4th of July. And so just watch for that. We're usually here on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, so stay tuned for that. We have even more great guests lined up for you. So just know that if you don't see us for a few weeks, that's with a new picture book, which, as we know, books are a great way to teach children about inclusion and celebrating who they are and being their authentic selves. And so that is what we're going to be talking about. Well, welcome. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Wells, and I am a children's book author and a mechanical engineer.
Yeah, I love that combination because I just think it's something people maybe wouldn't expect. But something I also I think is interesting is that you're a successful author now, but people may not guess that it took you a while to get here in terms of like doing the querying, getting rejections, until finally you hooked up with your current agent. Do you mind telling us some about that? Because I feel like a lot of aspiring authors, they get really discouraged when things don't happen right away, and they may not realize that even people like yourself who are so successful, that it took a while to get there.
Yeah, so actually, you are right. It took me about I would say 13 years to get an agent. A lot of that was me procrastinating, getting a little bit discouraged because in my mind, I felt like, well, I'm supposed to get an agent as soon as I get out of college or as soon as I reach a certain point. But that's not really how it works. It actually takes work and dedication to like hone your craft and know what's marketable, know what's sellable, and really another big part of it is building community because there's a lot of community, a lot of supporting community in the writing community. So actually putting yourself out there and putting your work out there and introducing yourself to all these amazing people in the industry, I found too has also been sort of beneficial in my journey.
I love that you mentioned that, and I want to talk about that some more later as far as community. And I think it's because I think it's important to mention that people may not really realize that how important networking is and how much, especially I think in social media, we have this idea that it's so negative and kind of a destructive space, or at the very least it's very distracting. And yet I feel like I've met so many wonderful people like yourself through social media, and that it can be really positive. Was that your experience?
Yes, absolutely. I think it really depends because I was actually having this same conversation with one of my friends, and it really depends on how you use social media because I mean, if you go on there with these negative intentions or just to go on there to like scroll and scroll and scroll, you're not going to really gain anything from it. But if you actually go on there with intention and say, hey, I want to get on here and learn about some sort of history or some sort of science, you can find that information through social media. So it really just depends on your intention when you get on social media.
That's a really great point because yeah, if you want to just scroll, then you can do do that and not out of it. And maybe we can go back to this idea about how you were, it did take a while, and some of that was just yourself becoming discouraged. So when you face that, because I'm sure that's something a lot of people go through, what kept you motivated so that you came back to it and ultimately were able to get an agent?
um, Well, I've realized that like writing is my like true passion. I say all the time, I always loved writing and I sort of learned to like math and science. And so that's how I ended up in the engineering realm. But like my writing has always been, I mean, writing has always been my passion. And so for some reason, I've just always sort of gravitated towards that because it was this light in my life.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And now, of course, you have three books, one that's just came out, two that are coming out soon. So why don't we start off talking about this wonderful book? It's Pride Baby. Why don't you tell us all about it?
Yeah. so it's Pride Baby. It really just follows a family as they start their day to prepare for and make their way to Pride festivities in DC. And as the family bounce with joy, the parents affirm their child's existence through the wonderful anthem. It's Pride Baby.
Yes. Yeah, and I love how that repeats throughout it. And I saw an interview that said that when you were writing it, you made sure to have a lot of exclamation points because you wanted people to kind of shout along with the book, to be screaming with joy and pride. And I feel like a lot of times people don't, when they're writing, I think maybe don't pay as much attention to to punctuation marks. But why was that so important here?
Um, Really, because I mean, when you think about exclamation points allow the reader to proclaim their pride in their authentic self, their pride in their existence.
Mm.
Each time they exclaim the refrain, it's pride, baby. It serves as a declaration of self-acceptance and empowerment.
I love it, which is really what the book is all about. I mean, it's such a joyful book. It has all, like you said, it has all these affirmations. It's also a tribute to queer history. Like there are murals of the queer icons like Marsha P. Johnson. It's a celebration of the legacy of DC Pride, which I think you had said that you didn't realize at first because you thought maybe it had come for Black Pride. It was maybe more in Atlanta, but then found out
Yeah.
so much in DC. Why is it so important for kids to know about this history? And how did you figure out how to incorporate this into a book? Because it's a picture book. I mean, so in a lot of ways, it's really simple. But when you start to analyze it, there are a lot of layers to it.
Um, yeah, so I mean, when you think about queer history and queer history in America, I mean, it is a part of American history. And American history is, it's diverse history. And through diverse history, empathy can be fostered, diversity can be appreciated a little bit more. And really just the contributions of the LGBTQ plus community can be acknowledged. Learning about all of these fabulous figures that you see in the book, it sort of instills this sense of pride, belonging, and even allyship through for kids.
Yeah, because I love how you phrase it that queer history is American history, because this is something that really all kids should be learning about, not just kids
Hmm.
maybe from queer families, but it's something that all of us should be learning about and be proud of. And um, so, how did you come to have this? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about how you came on this idea of creating this book or where it came from?
Yeah, so actually, after having a conversation with my editor, she came to me with this idea that she wanted to focus focus on a book that had this tie into the Black Pride movement. And so she wanted something that was a little bit more simple and a little bit more that'll fit the age range 3 to 5 years old.
Right.
And so after having that conversation with her and really after like, diving into the history of the Black Pride movement, it's Pride Baby just spawned from that because I wanted to again, I wanted it to be a celebration, like a celebration of this wonderful legacy of the Black Pride movement.
Was it hard to figure out like how to kind of distill it down into this really simple but very powerful message for this age group? Because like you said, is 3 to 5 is pretty young, and yet this is so it seems like it's so just perfectly calibrated to for
Mm.
them to understand.
Well, I knew I wanted to focus on affirmations, and so putting it in this form of like simple affirmations that made it like so much easier to write and dive into.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. And I want to talk also because that you're not just an author, you also volunteer with queer youth and have talked about how underappreciated this group is, how often mistreated they are. Why is it so important for them to have books like yours and to include them as main characters and really to celebrate queer joy and love?
Um, I think it's just really important for us to see that our possibilities are limitless. These particular books can serve as role models and for foster inclusive spaces for people to be themselves. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And But I do want to leave a little bit of time to talk about your other books. I mean, of course, this is perfect because of Pride Month, but you have another book coming out next month, which is Dante Plays His Blues, and then another coming out, I think, in January. So in Dante Plays His Blues, it's about a young boy learning to cope with housing. There it is. Love it. Housing insecurity, which is another topic that needs a lot more coverage in books. What inspired you to write about this, about housing insecurity?
Really just because prior to volunteering with LGBTQI plus youth, I would volunteer at public schools in Nashville while I was attending Tennessee State University, and I would read to a lot of these kids, and I would have conversations with a lot of these elementary school kids, and they were talking about the things that they were facing as kids, and a lot of the things that came up was housing insecurity, and so I felt like housing insecurity was one of those subjects that's often overlooked. And so through Dante's story, I wanted to aim to give a voice to those children who are experiencing housing insecurity or facing any type like any of those hardships that a family faces. Because sometimes even in children's picture books or even in books or in fiction in general, it mirrors real life experiences. And so, one thing for me as a writer, I've always wanted to have the opportunity to shed light on those real life experiences through the words that I write.
That's beautiful, especially, I mean, like you said, it's so important for kids to see their experiences reflected in a book. And somebody that's going through housing insecurity to be able to read a book about another kid, especially because it has all that element of social emotional learning in it. It's not
Hmm.
just a story about a kid who's going through this, but also about how he learns how to deal with his feelings, which is so beautiful. And it's through music.
Hmm.
So, what is it about music that you find that is such a powerful way for kids to kind of connect with their emotions and work through these feelings that they have?
So I feel like music is very versatile and it can be very impactful for kids, and not just even kids, but for adults as well, because it gives them an opportunity to access and understand and express their emotions.
Yeah, which is why I love that you incorporated this because I'm sure that it's going to be so helpful for kids who are going through this to read this, or really for any problem. Music is such a great way to deal with your feelings. And I wanted to go back to, because we only have a few minutes left, but I want to go back to this idea you were talking about finding when you are writing to find your community, to find this supportive network. And I know you're affiliated with Black Creators HQ. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why that's been so important?
Yeah, so Black Creators HQ, it was really just a space founded by and for Black creators to share our talents and to create stories that increase Black representation in all genres of literature.
That's great. And can you tell us a little bit more? Because I think, if I understand this right, that was actually maybe part of how you got your agent was through a conference like that. Is that correct? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really an opportunity to sort of bridge the gap between like individual artists and then like industry professionals. And so it's an opportunity to amplify and improve the contributions of Black authors and illustrators and publishing.
So, do you have any advice for somebody who's just starting out, how to go about finding, the community that's right for them, or how to network, or how to, like you said, like learning how to hone your craft? What would be your tips for somebody?
Definitely to go out there and like I feel like Google is a really good spot to start. Like search for different writing communities. There are plenty of writing communities out there. Definitely look into programs like PB Rising Stars. That's a mentorship opportunity that's available. SCBWI has been helpful. If you do identify in the Black or African diaspora, definitely reach out to Black Creators Headquarters. That's a perfect place to build community. Facebook groups. There are plenty of Facebook groups for children's book authors, or even just authors in general, or writers in general. Um, yeah, those are um, uh, some of the platforms that I've used to create the social circles that I have.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us. Actually, I forgot to mention if you want to give a quick shout out to your other book that's coming out in January.
Oh yeah, so the my third book that's coming out, Yvonne Clark and her Engineering Spark. We actually just had a cover reveal. It's electrically illustrated by Deandra Hodge, and it follows my college professor who went from a little girl who built and fixed things in her home to growing up and building things for NASA as an aerospace engineer.
That is amazing. Well, I can't wait to see it, and we'll be sure to share the cover reveal and our stories also. So, thank you so much for joining us. For anybody who just hopped on, you can watch the whole thing. We'll have it up on Instagram in a few minutes and later on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me, Lan.
All right, bye everybody.